Hi everyone, welcome back to First Principles. Today I'm very excited about the guest. We've got Vinita here, and we'll be talking about Tantra, Mantra, and Yantra. How are you doing, Vinita?
Namaste. I will start with a small invocation. Om Shuklam Baradaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you, Sagar, for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here and speak with you and go into the intricacies of Tantra, Mantra, and Yantra.
Thank you. Thank you. For the context of this episode, could you please introduce yourself to our audiences?
Sure. I am an author. Essentially, I think I would like to narrow it down to that at the moment. Just written my sixth book. It's going to be out in a couple of days. And that is specifically about the Lalita Sahasranama, which is one of the seminal texts of the Sri Vidya tradition. It's the 1,000 names of Lalita Tripura Sundari, the preeminent goddess of Sri Vidya. And so the other 5 books have also been about related topics, largely about Sri Vidya itself, encompassing Tantra, which is like a broad framework within which we fit in mantra, which is the spoken word, the uttered word, which comes with its own vibration, and Yantra, which is the sacred geometry, the drawings, which go back to mandalas and to geometry in its very essence. So this is what I've been writing about. And I also do a little bit of healing on the side because I think that's my calling. Apart from disseminating this information about Sri Vidya, I feel most satisfied when I'm trying to heal people because there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of PTSD which we see, and I think I've been able to help heal at some level, mostly on the energy level. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's dive right in then. What is Tantra?
Tantra essentially is a framework. If you break it down to the etymology of the word, you have tan, which means to weave. Okay, so that comes from the word tanoti. And the second half of the word is thra, which comes from trayati, which means to expand and to liberate. So effectively, Tantra means to weave in such a way that we eventually achieve liberation. So what is this weaving that we are talking about? For this, we have to just go back in time and understand how Tantra came about. It was more of a rebellion against the entire principle of Vedas, which at that time was usurped by a certain community, and it was very restricted. The common man was not allowed to worship or to have any kind of spiritual practice. It was very restricted to certain segments of society. And at this time, Buddhism was also on the rise. So there were some elements within Sanatana at that time who felt that perhaps just to keep people in the fold of Hinduism, we will have to change our approach a little bit. And this brought about the development of Tantra, which was organic to a large extent. But what main difference was that Tantra was much more, how does one say it, more individualistic, perhaps, more freedom for the individual, and there was no middleman in your approach to divine. So in the Vedic tradition, it was still a lot of dependence on the priest or the person who was doing the yajna and so on. Whereas with Tantra, what happened was a change came about where people were in charge of their own connection with the divine. So it went from sutra, which was what the Vedas were all about, you know. Sutra is like a thread. It was an aphorism. And then you had Tantra, which is a whole weave. So if you get the analogy there, it's like a sly pun where Tantra was saying, okay, there you had just a thread, and here I'm giving you the entire fabric.
Right.
So that's how it came about. And Tantra is only a framework. You can put anything into it to make it your own personal Tantra, right? So essentially, the philosophy in Tantra is that of Advaita, which is non-duality. The pillars on which it rests are mantra, yantra, mudra, perhaps, to some extent. And ultimately, the practical aspect of Tantra, you can see in application in all the rituals that we do, and also in yoga, in pranayama, in the asanas, and in all the 8 limbs of yoga effectively. In addition to all of this, there is one more underlying principle in Tantra, which is that of the Kundalini Shakti. So that is the Shakti which lies dormant at the base of our spine and which has to find its way through the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna Nadi, all the way to the Sushumna, to the Sahasrara chakra, right? So that effectively is Tantra in a nutshell.
Yes, you've given me a lot to double click on. So I'm gonna keep asking the questions for your definition. Okay, so starting with Vedas. Now, how compliant is Tantra to the original Vedas? And I guess Tantra also has the scriptures called Agamas or Agamas. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
The Agamas. In fact, the Agamas come towards the end of all of the literature. So the Tantras do come from the Agamas.
Okay.
Right? So in a way, Veda and Tantra are not two separate entities. There's a very seamless divide between the two, and sometimes they come together as well. But the Vedic path was a less democratic one. The Tantric path was democratized. It was for all, you know, it was effectively the spiritual practices became accessible to everyone, regardless of caste or gender. And its philosophy recognized the divine in everyday life, allowing everyone to pursue whatever they were doing in addition to having some kind of spiritual practice. So this is in direct contrast with the Vedas, which were more about an ascetic path. You know, there was a need for renunciation. There was a need to give up worldly attachments. And so what happened was the number of people who could practice were effectively narrowed. And then when Tantra came and it became open to all, with far more easy practices, which kind of, you know, took in the aspects of everyday living, it made it that much easier for Tantra to then become very popular.
So in this scenario, when you say divine in everyday life, we're talking about things we regularly consider divine, but also things we perhaps in polite society might consider vile. But there is divine there as well. Okay.
True. So that is why in Tantra, we have one school which is called the Vamachara Marga, which is like the left-hand path of God, as it is called, where the experiments that happen with consciousness involve the consumption of alcohol, involve the consumption of meat, possibly animal sacrifice, all these aspects in search of an alternate consciousness, in search of an experience which will give you that oneness with divinity. That it's the same search that we do in the Vedic way through introspection, through meditation, through chanting, all of that. So which then would be the right-handed path. But the same path also exists in Tantra, where the same aspects can be utilized, which means that we can use the chants. They're a little different from the Vedic chants because here we use more of the bija mantras. we use the yantras. So instead of the yajnas, we have more of the yantras. And we have our own set of rituals, which are slightly different from the Vedic path. Possibly not as complex, but still deep all the same. Because there is same fundamentals are in place. It's just that it's being built upon in a different fashion.
Okay. But you said that Tantra also, in this respect, one of the pillars is Advaita Vedanta, which is coming from the Vedas. So could you give us like a brief picture of what Advaita Vedanta is basically espousing?
That's a philosophy, right? So Tantra is a practical application of Advaita Vedanta, which is the philosophy. So here you have the chariot, and here you have the horse. You can't really use the chariot without the horse. And the same applies for the utility of the horse when there is no chariot. So you yoke these two together and you get a fully functional model. Now, where Advaita Vedanta fits into the entire philosophy is that Tantra believes that there is the universal intelligence, the divine intelligence, which for want of another word, better word, we use God very loosely. But essentially, that's what it means, the universal intelligence. And this universal intelligence is what fundamentally makes up everything that exists in what we know as the universe, right? As the Brahmanda. So you and I and every rock, every shell, every plant, every being is a part of that same universal intelligence. So this is Advaita, but for reasons, that the universal intelligence understands best, this is veiled from us.
Right.
This knowledge is veiled from us, that we are one and the same with this universal intelligence. So just to go back a little bit, there are as we know, creation, right? So we have Srishti, Sthiti, and Laya. So Srishti is creation, Sthiti is preservation, and Laya is dissolution. So this everyone knows. But there are two more aspects to creation. Only upon fulfilling these two aspects does creation become complete. The fourth aspect is Tirodhana, which means the veiling, which is brought about by this intelligence, right? To keep us from acknowledging the fact that we are the same as that which created us. Right. And eventually, the fifth aspect is called the Anugraha, which is the grace of the intelligence when this veil gets lifted and we become one with this knowledge, at which time we have the enlightenment, we have the understanding that we are no different from our creator. So this can be in various ways when we experience Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or when we talk of Jivan Mukta, or in some cases when people attain moksha, or go into Jivan Samadhi, or, these various aspects of it. So Advaita Vedanta, in short, is the most common example would be that we have the sun and we have, say, 1,000 buckets of water lined up, and the sun is reflecting in the water. And each of these reflections start to think that they're the sun in themselves. But for an onlooker, for the witness consciousness, it's very obvious that it is one sun which is reflected in the 1,000 buckets. Or we can give another example of droplets of water from the ocean, or even the wave which forms in an ocean. So the wave can take on a form, can have a name of its own, but eventually it blends in back with the ocean. You can't really separate the ocean from the wave. So that in reality is Advaita. Not two, but one. Singularity, in other words.
Yeah. But one in terms of energy, one not in terms of matter, because there are philosophical debates of if you are a materialist or if you're not a materialist. both of them can be really say that there is just one thing. So obviously this is on the side of energy, not matter.
So the idea is that duality needs to exist, but we are perceiving this duality simply because of our lack of knowledge, because of avidya, right? So the moment this veil of avidya is lifted, either through spiritual practice or through the grace of a guru or through the grace of the divine intelligence itself, we become fully aware of this unison, this union.
Right.
And then, although in life we see everything as good and bad, black and white, the yin and the yang, it's necessary for us to continue to exist, because once you realize that you're really no different from the intelligence that created you, then the motivation to live is no longer there. And we all need something to keep us going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a very clever creation, come to think of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Does the system have any answers on why did the creation happen? I mean, the ultimate bliss and source is with the universal consciousness. Why do we have so many manifestations of it? Are there any debates on that, or do they just leave it to?
I think in the entire Sanatana philosophy, the idea is that creation fell in love with itself. The creator fell in love with himself, herself, whatever, and then wanted to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be, felt, and also wanted, everyone, every soul that is created to have this experience of being,
right,
and to seek evolution. So that's what is said in the Vedas about creation. Why it happens is because of the creator's love for himself.
Okay, well, that's good enough. Okay. You talked about black and white. So I want to bring one black and white aspect of it. I have been in both the camps of being a theist, in the camps of being an atheist. And of course, I'm using Western words here. But there is the middle camp, in my opinion, which is, I think Tantra falls there, and then yoga, which could be influenced a lot by Tantra, especially the Nath tradition, which is experiential. So you don't need to start with faith. You just start with an action. And if you see the results, the faith develops on its own. Is that an accurate description of these three systems?
Sagar, I am not able to hear you very clearly. You will have to repeat yourself.
Sorry,
I'm sorry about it. Yeah, it was just, I really couldn't hear.
No worries. Is it good now?
Your voice is not very clear. Do you want to check that out once? Because
I'll check that. Give me a second.
Let me
pause this.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, folks. Sorry, I was saying there is one tradition, not tradition. I mean, I'm just talking about the black and white way of thinking. The black and white way of thinking when it comes to belief in God or non-belief in God is either like there isn't any, or you have to start with faith. I think with yoga and tantra, it's in the middle. You don't really have to start with faith. You need to experience it. It has to be a personal experience, and then the faith builds. Is that an accurate description?
It's an accurate description not only for yoga and tantra, but for Sanatana itself.
Okay.
Because in the philosophy of Sanatana, they make place for everyone. You could be a Charvaka, which means you don't believe in any of the philosophies at all.
Right.
Right? And you don't believe in the existence of the universal intelligence. And then you have Nastik, is someone who does not believe in the ultimate superiority of the Vedas.
Right.
So you could be both, and you could still be a very strong Sanatani. So it gives you space to be in any middle ground that you wish to be in. And it also allows you the freedom to decide that today you do not believe, tomorrow you could be a believer, and you will not be punished for it.
Okay.
Because in its infinite wisdom, Sanatana says that there is nothing which is not divine. Even the fact that you're questioning the existence of the divine is divinity itself.
Right. Okay. That answers my question. Let's get to the other limbs then. The other limbs are mantra and yantra. Now, and I guess mudra as well, you said. So what are these? What's mantra? Yeah.
Mantra effectively is just a sound. Okay. Every sound in our tradition is called, so we have a concept of the Shabda Brahman, right? So it's the sound as the universe itself.
Right.
Or the universe as a sound, whichever way you put it. Because sound comes with its own vibration.
Right.
And every sound, every uttered syllable, every unuttered, because sound also is of two kinds, ahata and anahata. So ahata is the sound which happens when you clang two things together. Anahata is like your heart beating, where there are no two things which are coming together, but still there is a sound. Okay. So it is from here that the thought of mantra starts, and our rishis in their wisdom and with their process of introspection came upon certain syllables, certain vibrations, which were to be articulated using the vak. Okay, so now vak in itself, vak is the uttered word, the spoken word.
Yeah.
So that in itself is a huge philosophy, because vak has 4 aspects. Right? It starts with para, pashyanti, madhyama, and then becomes vaikari, which is the spoken word.
Right.
So you have to go through these 4 methods, as it were, to actually arrive at the spoken word, which is finally your articulation, which slips off the tongue so glibly for us. We don't realize how much work is going into it.
Yes. Yes. Right. So
the rishis, they put these words, these syllables together as mantras. So Sanskrit in itself is a very scientific language. And then when you string together the alphabets in a certain fashion, it brings about a vibration based on what it is that is the requirement of that hour.
Right. Okay. So it's not just like prayer or essentially asking for some divine grace in like a colloquial way. It is a scientific system where a certain syllable is uttered and then it delivers a certain result. Is that, yeah?
So it is basically to influence energy patterns.
Okay. All right. In your favor, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
However you want it.
Right.
If something can work in your favor, it can also work against you. Right? So if you do it right, if you do it with the correct intention, then it works for you.
Right.
And if there is a malified intention, then you know it triggers whatever it is meant to trigger.
Okay.
So that is why there is this fear where mantras are concerned, because there is a possibility that it can be put to the wrong use.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you distinguish mantras from japa?
Mantras are longer malas, right? Japa are typically single, double, usually 2 or 3 mantras put together, bijaksharas put together, bring about japa. And japa is largely more of a meditative practice. Mantra is and can be done mostly, in your mind, mental practice. So mantras can either be in the form of stotra or, any of the myriad forms which we have, which could be longer versions like 1,000 names, 300 names, 100 names. Whereas japa is typically done on a smaller mantra, like Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, that kind of thing. So it's just like 2 or 3 bijas. Aim Kleem Sau, for example, or Hreem Kreem. So that kind of thing. So japa largely is mental, what is called manasika japa, which is largely done only at the level of the mind, not even necessary to articulate it, because these are bijas. Mantras are when bijas are strung together to form stotras and ashtotras and the rest of it.
Okay. This is a good time to bring in what bijas are. Then what exactly is a bija mantra?
So a bija is like reducing the sound to a basic syllable.
Right.
So, for example, you have Hreem, you have Kleem, you have, these are all the most used bijas. right? Even for that matter, Om you can talk of as a bija, although it is considered a pranava mantra. It is so potent that it gets the title of mantra by itself.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So bijas are largely used for japa.
For japa.
And yeah, to get into any kind of sadhana, it's important to start with the bija and then move on to the mantra associated with that particular deity, any Ishta Devata of your choice.
Okay. Okay. So mantras, the whole, like the stotrams are going to be more potent than just the bijas?
No.
Oh, okay.
The length does not define the potency.
All right. All right.
It's the devotion that you bring, and it's the constant nature of the practice that will define the potency.
Okay.
It is not determined by the fact that a Lalita Sahasranama, for example, is more effective than the Bala Tripura Sundari mantra. No, that doesn't work like that.
All right. So is it just different ways of getting to, like, depending on people's proclivities?
Yes. We start small in most cases. So bijas are very effective for meditation. So then the mantras come in, the longer mantras, they are more effective when you are trying to show your devotion by way of, doing the, calling the God by 1,000 names, listing out his or her attributes. So that is more of a bhakti path.
Right, right, right.
And the bija is more internal. It's like I said, it's a mental practice.
Okay, got it. Yantras, sacred geometry, and especially the Sri Chakra or the Sri Yantra. What are they?
It is said in the Puranas that so everything in Sanatana is, analogy, and it is narrative and story and all of that. So it goes that it was Shiva who told Parvati that there are 64 yantras. Okay, yantras meaning 64 sacred drawings, which largely start with a dot, which is the bindu.
Right.
Okay, and then the extension of a dot into a straight line, into a triangle, into, the square and the circle. So basically what goes into any yantra. We won't see any more geometric forms than these. Now, Shiva, in his, when he's talking to Parvati, says, I'm giving you 64 yantras, but the king of all these yantras is the Sri Yantra, which is like the master plan, from which you can extract all the other 64 yantras. So the Sri Yantra, in effect, is a blueprint of the entire cosmos. And when I say cosmos, because in Sanatana, we believe that there is no difference between the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Right.
So what we see in the universe is what you see in an atom as well. Modern physics is proving this to be right.
Right.
So this is like a hologram in which we exist. Everything can be reduced to an atom. And then eventually it's the atom which makes up the entire universe. Right. So the Sri Yantra is just a blueprint of the cosmos. And the potency lies in getting the geometry accurate. And for that, I find it very laughable when people ask, can I keep a Sri Yantra at home? Because when you bring a flower into the home, when you bring a plant into your home, when you carry your own body into your home, these are all manifestations of the Sri Yantra, because we are all built on that same sequence of the Fibonacci or the golden ratio, or whatever you want to call it. It's exactly that same configuration.
Right. Right. Okay.
So this is what the Sri Yantra is. It's just a very potent sacred symbol.
People do get it. I mean, when I was young, growing up in Delhi, there was either, I think, Asian Skyshop. They had this tele advertising thing, and they used to basically really sell the Sri Yantra. And I obviously couldn't understand because in my confusion, just keeping it at home does it help, or do you need to do sadhana in order to like invoke it and basically have a relationship with it?
When you buy flowers and bring them home,
Yeah.
do they have a deeper meaning than just the aesthetics of it? Do you need to do sadhana to the flowers? Do you need to pray to the plants that you have in the house? It's the same logic.
Okay.
You're just bringing in something which can harness the energy of the universe in a way. It's the same with flowers, for example. You're bringing in something beautiful from nature into your line of vision, which just makes it, it makes you feel better.
Right.
Having greenery in your house, it's the same thing. So there is no need to do anything. You can just have a Sri Yantra in your house and keep harnessing the positive energies.
Okay. All right. So it's not very demanding, which is good. One of the reasons why I like the system. Okay. Mudras. What are mudras?
Mudras are basically the hand gestures because all our nerve endings, they, we have them on our palms. So there's a way of ensuring that our energies can be kept moving without stagnation if we use our fingers effectively and use our palms effectively. So mudras are basically about using the energy endings and try to reawaken them if they've kind of gone stagnant, or kind of just bring about some kind of change in the energy patterns.
Okay. All right. I do have some tangential questions, and then I want to get back to the main line that I have in my mind, if you don't mind. Okay. How would you distinguish sadhana, specifically tantric sadhana, from regular puja, which might not be very Vedic, because in Veda, I think Arya Samaj had that thing about just yagnas, right? So how do you distinguish sadhana from puja and even just pratna?
Actually, if you look at what we do as puja in modern times, it is mainly tantric.
Yeah.
And it is also Puranic. It comes from our Puranas.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a sprinkling of the Vedas. Some of our prayers come from the Vedas, but most of the upacharas that we do, they're all Puranic in nature.
Right.
So sadhana is more of your own personal practice.
Okay.
And it could be anything. It could range all the way from chanting the Sri Suktam, which is a very, very Vedic kind of mantra, to meditating on the Sri Yantra, which is like the other extreme, which is tantric in nature. So it's a combination of what it is that you want to do, and you create your own sadhana.
Okay.
Or others create it for you. Okay. For example, it's like Sadhguru has the Shambhavi Kriya, Sri Ravi Shankar has the Sudarshan Kriya. So they are effectively putting together your sadhana for you. So you want to circumvent all of that, you can create your own sadhana.
Okay. So the individualistic path, if somebody is so inclined, it is still open. It is still valid. You don't need a gatekeeper.
No, absolutely no gatekeeper, no guardrails. Everything is down. And it's between you and your maker. Whatever you choose, however you choose to reach out to that universal intelligence is to be determined by you and you alone.
Right. Okay. You said tantric mantra versus Vedic mantra. Now, I understand the difference in rituals and I understand the reliance on priests. But in the mantras itself, is there any significant difference?
Except where it occurs. So you see, the Vedic mantras are more in the Rig Veda, or even possibly in the Yajurveda, and the tantric mantras are later editions,
right,
which have evolved over time. So even though, like I said, there is a common ground, there is a little bit of a difference that you can see. It's a very palpable difference. So most of the latter day mantras cannot be attributed to the rishis the Saptarishis. So these were later day additions.
Right. Okay. You mentioned Shambhavi Kriya, which is essentially a yogic posture in a certain asana with a certain kind of tenor mixed in with mantras and all that. I've taken an initiation in that as well. Um, is yoga also a kind of ritual then in the tantric sense? Even if you're not uttering anything, Zara, even if you don't have pictures of deities, it's yoga generally, like Kriya Yoga, it's done without any altar, I think. So is that also a tantric form?
Yoga is the culmination of all of Tantra.
Oh, okay.
In a sense, because we're studying all this philosophy, we are doing all these rituals, but like it is beautifully said in the Lalita Sahasranama, Antarmukha Samaradhya Bahirmukha Sudurlabha, which means that to reach the ultimate intelligence, the universal intelligence, is an internal quest. It is never about anything that is happening on the outside. Whatever rituals you do, whatever practices you are doing, ultimately it has to come inward. Until then, you're not making progress at all.
Right.
And yoga in its true sense actually leads you to an internal path. Okay, because yoga is not just the the pranayama and the asanas. It's also yama, niyama, pratyahara, dharana, all of those things which make you look inward. See, now let's explain it like this. We can, generally speaking, everything that we take in, right, is a downward movement of energy. So whether it's the food that we consume, whether it's the stimulation that we get from our devices, from the television, even sexual, energy, all of it is a downward moving energy, right? So anything which is coming from an outward external source is a downward moving energy.
Right.
The only time you will see energy which is coming from within is when you're practicing some kind of spiritual sadhana. Even if it is something like just watching your breath, because this is something you're doing from within.
Right.
And if you notice, this is an upward movement of energy.
Right. Right. Right.
So we have to differentiate these two very clearly. And in yoga, the main attempt is to get you to go within and seek that. And to cut out all the sensory impulses, to cut out everything which is going from the outside in and make it the other way around.
Right. Okay. So that's the goal. And now let's talk about energy, because you also mentioned Kundalini Shakti in your introduction. Give us the tantric anatomy of the body, because I don't think we can like cut open a body and see the nadis and see the Kundalini Shakti over there. So is this like an outer layer on the physical body? And then what's the anatomy like?
In Sanatana, in all our philosophy, we are not just this sthula sharira. We are not just the gross body. There is another energy body covering this gross body, which is called the sukshma sharira, which is all about the energy field. And then beyond that, there is what is called the karana sharira, which is the causal body.
Right.
Now, if you have to believe in reincarnation, like we do in our religion, then there has to be some carrier by which our Atma moves from one lifetime to another.
Right.
Now, if it were just about this physical body and the energy body, both perish. How does this carrying over happen? That's where the Karana Sharira comes in. But that was, I was just clarifying. Now, the most important thing here is the Sukshma Sharira, which is the energy body. Right. And like you rightly said, it's not something that can be seen on an fMRI. It cannot, you can't empirically point out to it. But by way of analogy, if you look at the 7 chakras, right, you can draw parallels between the chakras and the most important plexuses in the human body. So, for example, when we talk of the Agnya chakra, we are talking of the pineal gland and the pituitary. These two are the master endocrine glands. So Agnya means the master gland, right? So this is what is determining how the rest of the chakras are working. Just like your entire hormonal system is determined by what's going on here in the pituitary and the pineal.
Yeah.
And then we come to the Vishuddha chakra, which is the thyroid and the parathyroid. So I'm just telling you about the plexuses, just so that we get an understanding.
Yeah.
And then we have the thoracic and the cardiothoracic region, which is the place of the Anahata chakra, where you have all the major organs, including the lungs and the heart. Then after that, you have the Manipura chakra, which is all about the digestive, the assimilative aspects of everything that we ingest, not just food, even emotions, even, everything stimulating that we take in.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
After that, we have the Swadhisthana chakra, which is all about our sexual energy, which is covered by the adrenals, because that's where a woman carries the baby. That's where the man makes his sperm. And then finally, we have the Mooladhara chakra, which is more of the gonads. It's, the excretory system and all of that. So now these are the plexuses, the most important plexuses that we have covered. So the correlation is with these important organs in our body, and to ensure that energies don't stagnate at these various points, so that we can be in good health and we can find a balance.
Right. What's the energy called in the system? Is it prana?
Prana. And not one kind of prana. We actually have 10 different kinds of pranas.
Okay.
So you've got an upward moving, then you have a downward moving, so there's apana, vayana, all these samana, and all these different kind of pranas. So there are actually 10 different kind of pranas.
Okay. And nadis, are they channels? Like veins, but not veins?
Yeah, they're the imaginary veins.
Okay.
Our energy system. So they're like when we have electricity all around us, but we don't see, how it's running. It's very effectively hidden behind the walls, right? In the same way, these are hidden in our energy field, and there are 72,000 nadis or thereabouts, and where they come together are at the 7 chakras.
Are the 7 chakras? Okay.
Yes.
Now the
They
chakra.
kind of,
Sorry.
So in the Shat Chakra Nirupana, which is one of the most seminal texts of the Kundalini, philosophy or practice, we actually only talk of the 6 chakras, because the Sahasrara is outside of the realm of even, this energy system. So that we access only when we reach enlightenment or when we reach Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So it's these 6 chakras which on a day-to-day basis are of any practical importance, as it were.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you basically read my mind, because that was my question about that. Okay. When we are working on the different chakra systems, are we working on the 3 shariras, the 3 bodies together? Or are we just working on the physical body, and then later on we work on the causal body and whatever, the subtle body and the causal body?
We are actually only working on the subtle body. That work manifests itself in the physical body.
Okay. Okay. And
like, I'll give you an analogy here to just simplify it. It's like the electrical switch that you have.
Yeah.
Okay. To your air conditioner or to the television may not necessarily be near the television, but it is linked to it, right? So it's when you turn on that switch that something happens in the device.
Right.
So in a similar way, we are working on the energy system, which manifests in the physical body.
Okay. Okay. And is there any manifestations in the causal body as well, like the ultimate Karna Sharira?
Not really.
Okay.
That remains untouched.
It
is only the carrier of your karmas to some extent.
Okay. Okay.
But that remains untouched with all of this energy work that we do.
So when you talk about moksha, and you say about burning the karma, of not coming back into the reincarnation and basically circumventing or going through the cycle, is this practice helpful there?
Yes. If one needs to overcome all the aspects of living as we know it, and to overcome this cycle of birth and death,
Right.
which is called samsara. Now we have to do some work to ensure that we fulfill all the karmas, that all our karmas are burnt out.
Right.
Before we can seek that union with the divine, which happens, or we reach the Sahasrara chakra.
Right.
So the energy work is important in consonance with everything that we do in our everyday lives.
Right.
So the idea is to ensure that whatever prarabdha karma we came with, we just burn that and not add more karmas.
Right. Right. Okay.
And if our prarabdha karma is burnt, then we attain moksha, which means that, see, moksha is irreversible. It's when you become, when that drop becomes one with the ocean again, there's no way you can retrieve that drop.
Right.
Moksha is like that. But that is a very rare phenomenon.
Okay.
What we can aspire for is nirvikalpa samadhi, which means we get a glimpse of this oneness, of this Satchidananda. It's just ephemeral. It's like a chimera. We just see it and then we long for it all our lives.
Yeah.
So that is the quest, to at least see it and to understand that we are one with the intelligence.
Okay.
Whether we reach moksha should not even be a thought, because it will happen when we burn our karmas. So our focus has to be more on, let us not accumulate more karma in this lifetime.
Right. 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 Okay. All right. Speaking of quest then, tantric systems, the best of my knowledge, is the only system that embraces wealth. It embraces material progress. I don't think of any other system which, perhaps Gnostic Christianity, I'm not sure, but I don't think of any other system which allows for that. Why do you think that is? And why is Tantra like so open to it? I'm glad it is, but like, how come this, how does it stand out?
It's not just Tantra, it's Sanatana itself.
Okay.
Because Artha was okay. It was okay to earn money. It was okay to make copious amounts of money, because then it gave you better possibility of having greater good karma. Because if you earn lots, then you were also going to be doing good to society.
Right.
So, but Tantra takes it one step ahead. And it says that unless you have a certain degree of abundance, okay, so wealth not just merely as money or material desires, but abundance in all aspects of living. So abundance in health, abundance in your relationships, abundance in your vocation. So I think wealth is narrowing it too much.
Okay.
To money. It's more of an overall kind of wholesomeness, an overall kind of abundance.
Okay. So,
and I think this is very important because unless our basic requirements are covered, it becomes very difficult to be a spiritual seeker.
Right.
See, if I were a bricklayer, if I were doing physical work, I would just want to go and hit the bed. I would not be concerned about moksha or nirvikalpa samadhi or Satchidananda or any of those things. It's about just Maslow's hierarchy, as it were.
Right.
So the moment you hit this point where all your basic needs are taken care of, your search can then turn towards more evolved matters. So it's almost like in the chakra system, you've ascended from the Mooladhara, the Swadhisthana, and the Manipura. Okay, so because these are the lower chakras, and now you are more concerned with matters of the heart, with more mature, spiritually evolved matters, moving to the higher chakras.
Okay. Does the system help creative professions like designers, scientists, who are basically relying on really analyzing, coming up with the new hypotheses, testing it out, or a new design, testing it out to see the efficiency over there? Does it help with those idea generation, spotting patterns, and all of those things?
Overall, it helps every single individual who embraces this path.
Hmm.
And I can safely say that for most people who are Tantra practitioners, and I mean it in a very loose sense, whether it's Sri Vidya or whether it's any other form of Tantra which they have embraced, I have seen that they are in the, like literally the top 1% of whatever they're doing.
Right, right, right.
If it's a surgeon, if it's, like a top level engineer, these are all people who in a way have gravitated towards some tantric practice. They may not know it as that. They may only know it as a certain discipline they apply in their life. But that again is Tantra, because there's a broad framework that they have created for themselves.
Right, right.
Which is nothing but Tantra.
Okay, all right. You mentioned Tantra as a weave, but there's one more definition of Tantra as technique and technique to transcend. So that you agree with that? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Totally. Because see, Tantra is a methodology, a framework. So what does weaving mean basically? If you look even at the way handloom weaving happens, there is a frame on which the threads are run, right? So it is that technique which we are referring to via analogy.
Okay.
Here is the machine, as it were, where all of this is being put together. And what you bring to the machine, it could be warp and weft, it could be mantra, yantra, it could be mudra, it could be yoga, it could be anything that you choose.
Right, right.
So you determine what goes into the tapestry, as it were.
Right. Okay. Very broadly then, shamanic practices like ayahuasca, or perhaps the modern versions with like LSD or psilocybin, do they help in the sense of achieving that connection?
They give you a glimpse of that alternate consciousness.
Right.
Which we work towards with our sadhana. Right? So when we sit down for meditation for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, what are we seeking to do? Even with mantra japa, or even with the kirtans or anything, it's that one glimpse of what can exist beyond this headset. So that's exactly what an ayahuasca or an LSD trip will do.
Right.
Right? It will show you something which is beyond these dimensions that we are familiar with. So in a way, they're the same. Either you can seek it by sadhana, by devotion, by meditation, or you can get a glimpse of it through anything like you just mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I have been surveying the new age spiritual movements a lot. And what I'd find it different from like Tantra is very, how do I put this? Very well categorized, very scientific. So it's not just about feelings and floating abstractions. They bring it down to the concrete and they go back to the abstractions again. Was all of this like revealed? It's quite a revelation if that was the case.
I am sure it must have been revealed knowledge, because today when you extrapolate what we see in tantric literature with the outcomes in modern physics and the exercises therein, you see that there is a lot of commonality. Right. So we spoke of singularity. So Advaita is nothing but singularity in a way. Okay, you talk of the double slit experiment. You talk of the witness consciousness. Now, even people like Sam Harris and all of them, they say there is no such thing as free will, the illusion of free will. So that in a way is nothing but what we have been saying all along, that this entire life is merely a Maya. That entire reality that is before us is merely an illusion. So the semantics are different, but the underlying philosophy remains the same.
Okay. My reading is that, but this tantric systems are also like, they're not like, Maya is not poo-pooed, right? It's considered, it's embraced, and then one transcends. So is that particular aspect of it is what I find fascinating. But you are arguing that this is the case in all of us in Adhan Dharma.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And The only difference I would say is that Tantra embraces it a little more to say that it is only our perception that matters. Okay, perception is reality in Tantra.
Right.
Superseding even the fact that everything is Maya, it says how you look at, how you approach things.
Right.
That witness consciousness, that approach is supreme.
Okay.
Sacrosanct.
Right. In the materialist perspective, where I guess the argument now is consciousness comes from the physical matter of the brain. I am assuming this, we don't agree with that because consciousness is assumed as a given.
Consciousness is a fundamental.
Right. Okay. All right.
Because that is what Brahman is. That's what the universal intelligence is. And that's why we are all part of that same intelligence. So in a way, this explains collective consciousness. It explains the collective unconscious. It explains all of these things that we are grappling with, including the hard problem of consciousness.
Right. Okay. Well, I feel I've just touched upon so many concepts over here, and it's going to take a while for me to sink in. But in the last section, I want to try and glaze through a lot of questions I still have. Different forms of Tantra. There is, I guess the three basic distinctions could be Shakta, Vaishnava, and Shaiva. But please disagree with me if you want to, but this is my understanding. And then, of course, Sri Vidya comes in somewhere. Like, what are the different forms of Tantra over here? And like, why do we need these different forms?
Okay. So what you mentioned, there are the three different types of Tantra in the sense of how it is segmented in the Agamas. Okay. You have the Shaiva, you have the Vaishnava, and you have the Shakti traditions, right? Now, that is actually not the branching of Tantra that we have to understand. So that's an overarching kind of impression. But within Tantra itself, you've got Dakshinachara, Vamachara, and we've got the Kaula, Mishra, and Samaya schools.
Okay.
Now, this is the actual distinction that one has to make.
Okay.
Kaulachara, the Mishra, and the Samaya. Now, Kaula is very, very determined to follow the ritualistic path, which means it's more Bahya, it's more outer worship, external worship. Doing the Panchopacharas, using flowers, using kumkum, using, fire, Agni, whatever. Then you have the Mishra, which is a little bit of the ritual and a little bit of the internal work. Then you have Samayachara, which Swami Rama says is like the pinnacle in the Tantric tradition, which is completely internal work, where you overcome the need for the Saguna Brahman. Saguna Brahman is the name and the form that we give to the universal intelligence simply because we are embodied beings, right? And for us as embodied beings, it is very difficult to comprehend something in its nirguna form, which is formless, which is not palpable, which is not tangible. So Samayachara is that Tantra which focuses on this inward journey. Which is about the evolution which starts within and builds upon that to take us to moksha or to, whatever it is that we are seeking.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've read Swami Rama's on his website. They said it's like the highest form, Samayachara. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
But then the need for Kaulachara and the need for the Mishra school, again, in Kaulachara, left-hand path and the right-hand path, is it just to address the different kind of proclivities different individuals have? Okay.
We are not all born on the same spiritual level because of our previous karmas. So some of us are perhaps a little more evolved than the rest of humanity, simply because of the good karmas of a previous lifetime. Right? So there are some people who are just starting on the path in this lifetime. So for them, it is not possible to go straight into the worship of the Nirguna.
Right.
They have to start with the Saguna, understand, the various dimensions of the deity, and then slowly build it up to a point where they come to terms with the fact that the physical form is not necessary. It does not need to have a nama rupa. It can just be para, like supreme, without any form, without any shape. But it's very difficult to come to terms with that because, again, the headset.
Right.
Because we are embodied beings.
Yeah.
It's like this giant video game we are in. So we have to, move from level to level. There's no possibility of going from level 0 to level 1011 without traversing all the challenges which were put together by the video game maker.
Yeah. So in a very real sense, the simulation theory seems to be true here. Okay.
Yes. This is completely the simulation hypothesis. If you go more and more into Tantra, the one picture that arises is the simulation hypothesis.
Right. Okay. Let's take a regular materialistic teenager, right? Who's intrigued by listening to this or by listening to your previous work and reading your books. Now that person is concerned with, the basics, like making money, wealth in an expansive sense as well. So, goods and services, ideas, good job, all of these things. They're not particularly concerned with samadhi or moksha. How should they approach? Should they be like, when they start their sadhana, if they, get ordained and all that, should they, how do I put this? Is it bad to have those desires while you're doing the sadhana or
Not at all. It is very, see, first of all, I would say that stay away from spirituality for as long as you can afford to. Let it not come in the path of your living.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
See, it's okay when you're a little older and a little wiser and you're able to bring about a balance. But if you start it too soon and you get too involved with it, you will actually be doing yourself and society a disservice by running away from your responsibilities as a human being. Whether it's towards your parents who have aspirations for you, whether it's towards your, if you're in midlife, then towards your family, towards your wife, towards your children, towards your job. So while it is important to have some kind of spiritual practice, one tends to get very lost in it if one starts to. So it's important to kind of know that even if you're on the path, you have to balance it and ensure that you're doing everything else also to the best of your ability.
Right.
That is a very, very important caveat in Tantra, that you fulfill your roles as a grihastha, whatever it is that is on your plate at that point of time. Those duties and obligations cannot be foregone for any reason.
So don't use this as escapism or,
No.
Okay. All right.
Exactly.
But the sadhana, I'm assuming, can help with the abilities, can give you more abilities, and maybe take you further in the path, in the material path as well.
If you're able to limit it. Right? So if, for example, we start with a 10-minute sadhana, and they're able to keep it at, say, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, it's not eating away into any of your obligations. It's fine. But typically what I have seen, what happens is they get more and more drawn into it and they digress from what they have to actually achieve in life before they move on to the spiritual path. Okay. And I will tell you the problem here, Sagar. It's that 8, 10, 15 years down the line, they come back and they realize that they have wasted, in their words, right? They have wasted 15 years of their life pursuing a chimera when they could have used it for a better purpose.
Yeah.
And this is my experience because I'm counseling so many people on the spiritual path. And this is the one common thing I see where they've given up on the reality of living too soon. Thinking that, this is an escape and this is going to fulfill all my desires and I'm going to get away from all of the pain. The pain is never going to go away. The suffering is never going to go away.
Yeah.
Right? It's important to have this perspective.
Right.
That there is no escape. The spiritual path is not for you to run away from the reality of life.
Right. It's to aid it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What is Sri Vidya? And where does this come in this distinction?
Sri Vidya is a subsect of Tantra.
Okay.
It is largely a Shakta tradition.
Hmm.
It is the worship of the divine feminine.
Hmm.
And an offshoot of the Tantras is what is called the Dasa Mahavidyas, the 10 wisdom goddesses.
Hmm.
Now, each of these goddesses, which starts with Kali and ends with Kamalatmika, are wisdom goddesses. And they have their own iconography, they have their own narrative, they have their own, the rationale behind why each one came into existence. Sri Vidya talks about Lalita Tripura Sundari, who comes after Kali and Tara. So she's third. So this is not hierarchical, just to explain to you that she is the third manifestation. So she is the first Saumya manifestation. Saumya as in not Ugra, not the fierce manifestation, not like Kali.
Right.
Like Bhairavi, not like Chinnamasta. These are all the fierce manifestations. So she's the first benevolent, like a very motherly, gentle kind of figure who promises abundance in every respect. So it's not just abundance, there's knowledge, there's fearlessness, and there is abundance, which she brings. So these are the three aspects that separate her and distinguish her from the others.
Okay.
So Lalita Tripura Sundari, which means Lalita is the playful one. Again, playful meaning it takes us back to that whole simulation hypothesis. Right? So it's like she likes to play just for the sake of playing, just for the sake of creating. She creates everything, and then, it's like in one moment, Unmesha Nimishotpanna Vipanna Bhuvanavali. So in the blink of an eye, she can create and dissipate this entire universe just for fun.
Right.
Tripura Sundari, meaning that she is the goddess, she's the beauty of all the triads that exist. So the most important triad is that of time, space, causality. And you take off from there and then you go into, you can list out hundreds of triads. Yeah, anything. I mean, even if you look at Ayurveda, we have Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Or if you look at the three gunas, okay, so you have Rajas, Tamas, Sattva. Earth, sky, heaven.
Right.
Bhuva, Swaha. Okay, then we have past, present, future. Waking, sleeping, dreaming state. So all of these triads.
Okay.
She's the empress of all of these triads. So that the wholesome worship of her, of Lalita Tripura Sundari, is called Sri Vidya. And the operative word here is Shri. Shri comes from Ashraya, which means shelter. And the premise of Sri Vidya, the sadhana, the sankalpa that we make is, let me not seek shelter with anyone. Let me offer shelter to everyone. And for me, that's a very powerful statement, because coming from a woman and coming from a long lineage of patriarchy and misogyny, this is like standing there and saying that here is an independent woman who is not ashamed of what she brings to the table. Right. And I think that is why we are seeing, like this outpouring of Shakti consciousness in modern times, because this is the need of the hour.
Right. Right. Okay. So the Sri Vidya sub-tradition of Tantra is basically whatever you describe, the sadhana is meant to get there. Okay. All right. You've also mentioned
the question.
Yes. Yes. But like,
yeah, it could be bhoga, which means just living a very pleasurable life.
Yeah.
Even that is acceptable in Sri Vidya.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it could be your quest for moksha. It could be, or you could find the balance between the two. Or you could swerve to this corner or that corner. It doesn't matter. But it will give you both eventually.
Okay. At the time of speaking, I'm definitely in the bhoga camp, but I'm open. The part of the porous.
Okay, let's put it like this. I was in the Bhoga camp
Hmm.
For the longest time. And I think a moment comes during sadhana when you realize, and it's very organic. It's not something that is forced. And then you realize the triviality of everything.
Right.
And the superficiality of this experience, this qualia of life itself. And then slowly the shift happens. And then one wants the answers, one wants something beyond the material. But what Sri Vidya does so beautifully is it equips you with all the armaments that you need to experience life fully.
Right.
So there's no desire left ultimately.
Right.
So everything is fulfilled. You've tried every adventure, you've tried everything, every experience, and then now you're ready to move on.
Yeah. I've looked online at a lot of schools who teach it. So the confusing thing about like Hinduism or like Sanatan Dharam is like you have so many congregations and the rules can be kind of different. And there is no one book, which is a good thing, in my opinion. But well, even the Bible is technically a library, but whatever. So what are the levels here? I know the 3 stages like Bala Mantra, Panchadashi, and Shodashi. Does it have 3 levels to sadhana or there are multiple levels?
There are multiple levels.
Okay.
I would say I would liken it to the 9 avarnas of the Sri Yantra.
Achha.
Right? So I say ideally 9 levels.
9 levels, okay.
But this is just in a manner of speaking. There are multiple levels.
All
but
right.
it's easier to break it down into 9 levels. And at each level, you traverse one of the veils, one of these avarnas of the Sri Yantra to eventually reach the center point, which is the Bindu.
Okay. So if you liken it to a university degree, how do we know we are progressing? How do we know we have graduated from one level to the other?
It is not something that is palpable. It's not explicable, but it is an experience that you will have.
Right.
You will see more synchronicities. You will see more serendipities. There will be people who will come into your life who will take you further down the path. And that is an indication of movement.
Right.
See, one thing is for sure, once you start the practice, there will be a lot of movement happening because you've accelerated your karma. So the indications may not be something that you are looking out for, but for sure your experiences will tell you that you're not the same person you were when you started the practice.
Okay. The people in the psychedelic
on it and say, okay, it was at this point.
Right.
But for sure the experiences will come.
Okay. So this is good to know because the only other kind of you said it's not explicable, you'll know. So people in the psychedelic community who do the research on qualia have this thing called the noetic qualities, right? So it's not just that though. It's also things you can spot things happening. You can see. Okay, it's interesting.
And I see this. I've initiated about 2,000 people in the past couple of months, and for all the majority of them, it could perhaps be imagined. It could be, like a self-fulfilling prophecy where they're saying, I got this promotion out of turn. I got this, I got that. I'm not sure, but overwhelmingly, I see that at least there's a positivity, there's a hope with most people who start this practice. So for me, that is enough to know that everyone who has started this, I'm sure there are some off cases. They might have fallen off the, track or whatever, which is okay.
Yeah.
But by and large, my experience has been that people feel something good has happened to them, some positive development. Okay, so initially it might not look like a good thing. It might actually be something negative. But then in retrospect, they see that because that happened, the outcome was positive.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry about the noise here. A lot of things are happening. The headphone's not working, but I'm sure something's doing this in a good way.
Right.
Okay. So one way I'm likening it is to a lever on the energy. So of course you do things materialistically as well. I mean, I think Joe Dispenza also speaks a little bit about that, but this is also operating at the high leverage on the energy level in order to sort of like, okay, level better.
So, if you liken it or you want to compare it with, the law of attraction or all of these techniques of manifestation, so they talk more about visualization. Whereas in our tradition, we are focused more on the rituals. So there's a slightly deeper philosophical framework on which we are based.
Right. True.
That is the major difference between the law of attraction, which again is very limited to only pursuing material desires.
Yeah.
And for us, we have a deeper tradition, a deeper philosophical refrain, and the fact that we use rituals instead of visualization. That's largely the difference.
From a practical standpoint, though, I find it hard to hold visualizations. But when you're in a particular context, that thing really comes in here. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's just easier. I mean, that's what I've found out.
I'll give you one example, which I feel works really well for me. There is this beautiful rendering by Adi Shankara called the Kanakadhara Stotra.
Right.
Okay. So Kanakadhara means it's like a rain of gold. So how he came to write this was as a young boy. This was his first writing. As a young boy of 8 years, he goes from home to home seeking alms. And he goes to this house where there's a very old woman. Very poor. She has nothing to give him. She just has one gooseberry.
Right.
And she willingly gives it to him. And he is so moved by her grace. The fact that, look at the gratitude she has, that the one thing she has, she's giving to him.
Yeah.
And at that time, he starts singing this. It goes, Angam Harehe Pulakabhushanam Ashrayanti. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is, okay, so basically what happens is it starts to rain golden gooseberries on her when he sings this song. So when I listen to M.S. Subbulakshmi's rendering of Kanakadhara Stotram, whether I want it or not, for me, it's like I visualize, gold falling all over. It's like abundance raining all over me. So it's just the vibration of the words that brings about this sensation of abundance. Just completely overwhelming when you first listen to it, when you just feel soaked in abundance. So it has to do with the words, it has to do with the voice, it has to do with the vibrations. So this is a lot easier than sitting and trying to visualize something for 5 minutes flat.
Yeah. And I kind of feel silly while doing that as well, although I don't want to, but I do. So, but this is obviously, it's helpful. Let's speak about the entities here. Are they like real in the sense that they exist out there, or are they like archetypes, like Jungian archetypes in our
Only archetypes.
Only archetypes. Okay.
All energies perhaps, but only archetypal. They don't it's not like you can, pin them down, or you can give them, like any shape or form. It's very clear, even when we do the Pitru Paksha and all of those rituals, that they only exist as energies. They cannot make themselves into any kind of form, even if they want to.
Right.
This is made amply clear in our texts.
Right. Okay. Last two questions. If somebody wants to start, how do they start, and how do they figure out the exact mechanics of the sadhana they want to do?
So that's the reason why gurus are important, because it's difficult for us to determine what the starting point of the race is. If anyone wants to start with Sri Vidya Sadhana, I would ask them to just send me an email. You can post my email address.
I will do.
And I will send them the first step of Sri Vidya Sadhana, which is the Bala Tripura Sundari mantra. They practice that for 40 days. This needs no initiation because it's a Prasiddha mantra. And then they experience it for themselves, and then we see if they're ready to move to the next step.
Right. Okay. And then finally, can you describe the ascension of the Kundalini energy through the 7 chakras, or the 6 chakras, however you want to put it, from the Muladhara to the Sahasrara? and what it feels like, I mean, to you or to like an average person?
So there are different ways of feeling this.
Okay.
Okay, for some people, it's just like a frisson, just like a sensation. For some, it's a very palpable tingling. For some, it's just the heat. So it could be a variety of experiences. We should not be judging these experiences, but my personal experience is that definitely you can feel the traversing. And it might be, at first, when you start the practice, it might just be not entirely the whole path, just somewhere down the line. For me, I know for a fact now that I can feel it very easily till my heart. It's when I have to lift it from my heart to the Sahasrara that it's a very complex exercise. But for me, how it feels is I feel that it's only a couple of seconds in that sensation, but it could actually be like a good 20-25 minutes have passed, because I think time, in that headspace, time is not something that we can relate to, because it's a different way of looking at time. So there are times when I've thought, okay, it might have been a couple of seconds, and then only to see that, oh my God, it's been like 20 minutes or 25 minutes of just being in that space, of being in that zone of Sachidananda, of just like a bliss consciousness, where it's just pure light, and it's very difficult to explain, but it's just not something that is in the realm of our everyday consciousness.
Yes, but you do feel it in the kshetram, or the area wherever the chakras are described. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You do feel it, and largely, I think it starts to make itself felt from the anahata upward. Until the anahata, for me, I don't know how it is for others, but for me, I think when the ascendance starts from the anahata, then it becomes much more palpable as an experience.
Right.
And then also there are certain physical manifestations we have to look out for. Like, for example, with the strengthening of the chakra system, one becomes so much better at communication, for example, because Vak Shakti, right? Because Vak Shuddhi also, because there's a purification of the entire system.
Right.
So everything starts to perform better. The functionality of your body improves so radically. And all you've done is made some changes at the energy level.
Right.
You've not done anything on the physical level. But that translates into changes in the physical body.
Right.
Like, for example, people who typically, again, this is not like a blanket statement, but from what I have seen, people who've had excess weight issues, the moment they become very dedicated sadhakas, it just falls away on its own. Any hormonal imbalances, women struggle less with their hormonal issues, menopause becomes a breeze. All these kind of, intangible benefits come into play.
Right.
That's the beauty of the energy system then.
So this could be like the siddhis that's talked about. Like, you communicate better if the vak gets cleared. All right.
These are at a much higher level because they're talking of supernatural powers. Like Anima Siddhe, Laghima Siddhe, Garima Siddhe. So that's like, you become like this 7-foot tall human being, or you become like a little tiny Lilliput. So those are the actual siddhis which are listed in our texts.
Yeah.
But what we effectively become is a manifestation machine.
Okay. Perfect. That's a perfect place to. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If you start to, whatever your desire is, you see that somehow in some form or shape, it gets fulfilled.
Yes.
So
Yes.
all the more reason to be careful, because if you can manifest the good, you can also manifest the bad.
Yeah.
Which means you have to purify your thought to a point where even by chance or by mistake, you're not thinking ill of someone, because then that will manifest.
Yeah. So be careful in road rages and by swearing at others. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. This is great. Do you have any parting thoughts?
Not really. I think we've pretty much covered everything, but I would love to end with a blessing for everyone who is tuned in today.
Yes.
This is from the Rig Veda.
Hmm.
It's actually a Kila Suktam. And it talks about abundance in all spheres, which I think, is my pet project, because for me, abundance is not merely about one aspect of living. Unless all the aspects of living are covered, we are not really leading a wholesome life.
Yes.
So if I may. Om Shrivarchasvamaयुष्yamarogyamavidhachobamanam mahiyate dhanyam dhanam pashum bahuputralabham shatasamvatsaram dirghamayuhu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Matre Namaha.
Thank you, Vinita. I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Sagar. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
And I look forward to being in touch with you.
Absolutely.
And all the very best to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.